100 civila, uključujući djecu, ubijeno je u velikoj izraelskoj kopnenoj, zračnoj i pomorskoj ofanzivi pokrenutoj u petak rano ujutro na sjeveru Gaze. U međuvremenu Gaza gladuje, djeca umiru, a bolnice su bombardovane. Ekskluzivni gost Pulsa Planete Newsmax Balkans je australijsko-palestinski dječji hirurg Mohammed Mustafa, koji emotivno govori o najtežim odlukama za vrijeme boravka u Gazi. Ukrajina i Rusija u Istanbulu o prekidu vatre. Šef ruske delegacije Medinski rekao je da je ruska strana uglavnom zadovoljna sastankom s predstavnicima Ukrajine. Ukrajinski zvaničnici pak ruski zahtjevi neprihvatljivi. Trump završio turneju po zaljevu, milijarde vrijedni ugovori sa Saudijskom Arabijom i Emiratima. Gotovo 100 ljudi, uključujući djecu, ubijeno je u velikoj izraelskoj kopnenoj, zračnoj i pomorskoj ofanzivi pokrenutoj je u petak ujutro na sjeveru Gaze. Saopćila je to palestinska civilna zaštita pod upravom Hamasa i potvrdili su to stanovnici. Civilna zaštita navodi da je tokom noći bombardirano najmanje 9 kuća i šatora u kojima su boravili civili, te da su primili desetine poziva ljudi koji su ostali zarobljeni. Svjedoci su također izvijestili o dimnim bombama, artiljerijskoj paljbi i tenkovima u Beit Lahiji. Izraelska vojska saopćila je da djeluje u cilju, kako su rekli, pronalaženja i uništavanja terorističke infrastrukture na sjeveru Gaze, te da je tokom proteklog dana eliminisala nekoliko terorista. U najnovijem izvještaju Međunarodna klasifikacija sigurnosti hrane, odnosno IPC, konzorcij stručnjaka koji djeluje pod okriljem Ujedinjenih nacija, navodi da je došlo do ozbiljnog pogoršanja stanja u Gazi u odnosu na posljednju procjenu iz oktobra 2024. godine. Prema podacima, 500.000 ljudi, svaki 5. stanovnik, dakle, suočava se s glađu, dok su ključne potrepštine za preživljavanje ili iscrpljene ili će nestati u narednim sedmicama. Blokada je uvedena početkom marta nakon završetka prve faze privremenog primirja, koje je konačno prekinuto kada je izraelska vojska pokrenula novi val napada. Humanitarni radnici na terenu navode da su zalihe iscrpljene, a skladišta potpuno prazne. Izraelski premijer Benjamin Netanjahu i dužnosnici u njegovoj koalicijskoj vladi odobrili su nastavak pregovora o oslobađanju talaca u Dohi u Kataru, ali su ponovili da je Izrael posvećen okvirnom prijedlogu američkog izaslanika za Bliski istok Steva Witkoffa. Ovaj okvirni prijedlog predviđa privremeno primirje od oko 40 dana u zamjenu za oslobađanje barem polovice preostalih talaca. Izrael se, međutim, protivi svakom dogovoru koji bi garantirao ozbiljne pregovore o potpunom okončanju rata, osim ako Hamas ne pristane na opcije koje su trenutno na stolu, kao što je to napuštanje pojasa Gaze. When Israeli airstrikes resumed over Gaza, breaking a fragile ceasefire, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, a 35-year-old emergency physician from Perth, was there. He had returned to Gaza on his second mission with the Palestinian Australian New Zealand Medical Association, working at Al Ahli Arab Hospital, known also as Baptist Hospital, Gaza City's last functioning medical facility. What he encountered was chaos. We were placing chest drains in the streets, operating by phone light, carrying injured children to scanners ourselves, he recalls upon his return to Australia. The hospital had become a complete battlefield. Days after Dr. Mustafa left, Al Ahli was bombed. Now back in Australia, he's speaking out, not for sympathy, but for justice. He tells the stories of the children who didn't survive, the parents who begged him to save them, and the unbearable choices he had to make. He urges action, an immediate ceasefire, access to aid, and protection for civilians and medical staff. Silence might be safer, he said, but silence is the face of this complicity.
We've worked throughout the entire night. We haven't stopped. The bombing has been non-stop. We've run out of ketamine. We've run out of propofol. We've run out of all painkillers. We can't sedate anyone. We can't give them any analgesia. When we intubate people, they wake up and they're choking because we have no sedation. There are 7 girls getting their legs amputated, no anesthesia. The bombing is still going on. The room is still shaking. I haven't slept. We went to bed at about 1 o'clock, and at 1:30 the bombing started. It's about 10 a.m. now. I've just gone back to my room. I'm lightheaded, I'm dizzy, and I mean, it was just mostly women and children, burnt head to toe, limbs missing, heads missing. You know, there's a video I put up on my story of me doing a chest drain. The gentleman that did the chest drain, and he died on the way to the CT scan. There's another video of 3 girls laying on a bed. That's his 3 girls, who are now orphaned. Their mother didn't even make it into the hospital. She was killed along with their other sister. I don't know what to tell you. I was here in June, nothing to this intensity. This is unbelievable, and the bombing is still going on. The rooms are still shaking. The screams are everywhere. It's insane. I need to just take 15 minutes, or even an hour, just to rest, to go back in there and go back down again. I feel awful to leave, but I've been there all night and I haven't stopped, and my legs are shaking and I feel dizzy and lightheaded. The smell of burnt flesh is still in my nose.
For Dr. Mustafa, speaking out is no longer a choice, it's a duty. And in these moments, I'm being joined by Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, emergency physician from Australia, from Perth. Dr. Mustafa, welcome to Newsmax Balkans, and thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that I got me a little bit emotional watching that, because it took me back to that night. It was a very difficult night.
Let's talk about that night, Dr. Mustafa. Take me back to that night. All right, to the moment the ceasefire was ended by Israeli airstrikes, you just come off your shift. What was that night like for you, your staff, for Palestinians, for the children, for women, elderly, the sick?
You know, airstrikes are scary. They're frightening. You know, if you're in the vicinity where there's an airstrike and the windows blow in, or the room starts shaking, or, you know, bits of shrapnel flying, these things are all very, very scary. But, you know, that night, the intensity of the bombing, I was asleep right next to the window, and the window had already been destroyed from previous bombings at the hospital. And, you know, it was just a window frame and plastic bags, you know, to stop the air coming in, and it just blew open. And I fell out of my bed, and we were just, the ferocity at which these bombs and the frequency in which they were dropping, we knew that the ceasefire was definitely over. This was like it had been when I was in June. This was really intense bombing. And within about, 15 minutes, we were down in the emergency department, and it was just hundreds of people there. The emergency department was full. We only have a few beds anyway, but, we were treating people on the floor. We were, within half an hour, we were treating people outside on the floor. And there's only one CT scanner for the whole of, Gaza City. And it's not located in the emergency department. It's located about 100 meters, 150 meters away. And, you have to transport the patients to the CT scanner. And so many needed CT scans, and there wasn't enough beds, that we were just carrying people to the CT scanner. We were literally picking them up and carrying them to the CT scanner. When we were there at the CT scanner, people were waiting so long to get a CT scanner that they died waiting for a CT scan. The man that I took in personally died while he was getting scanned on the CT scanner. and I'd put a chest drain in on the entrance into the emergency room on the floor. I put a chest drain in him, and we stabilized him enough to take him to the CT scanner. But once we got him to the CT scanner, he died. And because there were so many people, we literally just had to pick him up, put him on the floor, and get the next person in. You know, when you see that amount of women and children burnt, dead, the injuries are so horrific. And, you know, it's just imagine, you know, all of these patients, and each one of them has their own story. Each one of them has their own type of injury. Each one of them has lost either all their family or some of their family. And there's a lot of emotions in the room going on with family as they bring in their injured and they bring in their dead. And that creates a lot of tension as well, because people are screaming and they want you as the doctor to see their family member, but there's only a few doctors there. And it becomes a very difficult environment to work in, because then you have to pick and choose who you attend to and who you leave on the floor. And, you know,
the thing you say, the decisions you had to make, I cannot imagine what it does to a human. Dr. Mustafa, there was something that you spoke about upon your return back to Australia, that is anesthesia. I want to talk to you about this as well. So in a war zone, anesthesia supplies are limited. Time is brutal. You had to make those impossible choices. Can you talk about the weight of these decisions? Who you could sedate, who had to be conscious through the agony, and how you actually live, how you have to live with those tough calls that you have to make. Can you tell us stories? Can you tell us the stories of those children for which you had to make those decisions?
You know, the hospital rationalizes its anesthesia because, you know, there's a blockade. Therefore, we don't know when the next shipment of anesthesia is coming in. And therefore, we can't use all the anesthesia in one mass casualty event. We can't freely use it. Therefore, you have to be very careful about what you use and how much you use. So even if we did sedate somebody, we would sometimes sedate them with a very low dose. You know, we would sedate them with half the amount that you usually would sedate somebody. And that means that people are still awake. And you could be doing procedures like pulling an arm back together that's severely broken, or a leg that's twisted the other way. And you have to pull the leg and they're awake, and it's maybe a child. And as you pull this broken leg, and you can hear the bones crunching, but you've got to put it in a splint to hold it, to secure it, to stop the bleeding, to tourniquet it. And you can hear the screams from the child. And even if you've partially sedated the child, it's extremely painful. And, you know, we had this other mass casualty event. It wasn't that night, it was a different night. And it was a child that was brought in, and both of them had head injuries. And one of them had a scar on his face, and his skin, you could actually peel it all the way back to halfway back his head, and you could see his skull, and he was still alive. And the other child that was with him also had another head injury as well, because it was a building that had collapsed on them from a missile strike. And I could see that child was partially in and out of consciousness. And you could see the dent in his skull. And I knew that he wouldn't survive. And even though you could physically see him struggling, I chose not to give him any sedation. And we chose to partially sedate the other child, because we literally had to pull back his skin from his head and clean inside his head where his skull was from all the debris. And I just couldn't live with myself if I did that without sedation to that child, because we literally had to pull his face off. So this is a
decision that you make. I'm not sure if my reasoning is right, is in place, and this is probably the heaviest and the most difficult interview that I had to do. So I'm going to ask you this. So the decision that you had to make, whom to give the anesthesia, is whether or not the child will have to live or not, whether they have to live with the pain that they had encountered at that point. Am I on the right trail here? I'm not really sure if I'm understanding.
Yeah. So look, the first time I was there in June, there had been a medical blockade for about 6 weeks before I'd entered, and we were very low. You know, if you wanted to take ketamine or you wanted to give any sedatives, they had to go get it from a box. They had to go get it from a lockbox. So none of it was available on the floor. And, you know, when there would be a mass casualty event, it would arrive after maybe 20 minutes because it would be in such low supply. And at that stage, you really had to decide who to give it to and who not to. This time when I arrived, we had a little bit more medication because, you know, there'd only been about 2 weeks of the blockade when I first arrived. Obviously, by the time we got to the end, supplies were already beginning to get very, very low. Now, because I've been there before and I know what it's like when there's no anesthesia and no sedation, it's very brutal. And I, you know, the siege's ongoing till now. You know, I think the UN managed to get 3 trucks of medical supplies into Gazi. How many of that is anesthesia and pain meds? I don't know. But even if they were to bring in, you know, a lot, you see how many mass casualty events they're having on a daily basis. So you have to be very strategic about how you use these medications because we don't even have enough antibiotics either and other medications. And you've also got to remember, we also need those sedatives when we perform surgery as well. So it's not just for the emergency room. So the way that we rationalize these medications is we have supplies for the emergency room, we have supplies for the intensive care unit, and we have supplies for the surgical unit. In the emergency room, I don't know how many mass casualty events we're going to get in a day, and I don't know how many and how much supply we've got left. So therefore, I'm always very cautious about how much I give. And my pragmatic approach is, if I know this person is going to die, I would not give them any sedation because I knew their death was imminent. If the person, you know, is in so much pain and they're screaming, you know, to have that much energy to scream, it usually means that they're going to be okay, or that they you know, they're not imminently dying. It's usually those that are very quiet and are struggling to call out for help. And as difficult as it is to say, it helps you to make that decision because you, if it was...
Take your time.
This, you know, you don't have to hear them scream. And so therefore, when you don't give them the medication, you're not reminded that you haven't given them anything. And, you know, that's partially my own weakness and why I chose not to give to those particular patients.
I'm going to ask you a very honest question here. What does that do to a physician, to a professional, to a human being like yourself, when you have to make those decisions? What does it do to you? What has it done to you as a human? You're human too. We have to ask you this question.
Yeah. You know, I've struggled a lot. I struggled the first time when I went because the first time I went, I was suturing children and the sutures had written on them, not suitable for humans. So when we would try and suture people, you would have to, you know, try 5 or 6 times with the needle to pierce the skin for a single suture. And when you're doing that to a child and they're screaming and you have to hold them down and you've got nurses holding them down and family holding them down, it's difficult. It's difficult to, you know, when I have to put in a chest drain in a child and I can only partially sedate them. It's difficult because you're stabbing them in the chest. You're putting a hole in their chest that goes all the way into their rib cage and into where their lungs are to put this chest tube in. It's a very violent procedure. And to inflict that much pain on a child, when you have children with a severed arm and it's hanging off and you need to put it in a splint to hold it so it's not flopping around everywhere, the amount of pain when you're pulling a child's arm. And because we're in a mass casualty event, even if we had sedation, I just don't have the time to sedate this child, do this procedure properly so I can go see the next person. I've got to just stabilize and move on to the next. So even if there is sedatives, the time and the staff that we have doesn't allow us sometimes to even give it at the start of these mass casualty events. You know, sometimes I felt like a butcher more than a doctor when I was there. And a lot of the time I felt like a witness more than a doctor because of the amount of people that just died around me, just bled to death on the floor. The people that, even when we got chest drains in them, like the man that I took to the CT scanner and they died anyway. The people that we would traumatize them so much and we would eventually, you know, they might even make it to the wards and have their surgery, but they would die 3-4 days later from infections or other problems or other complications. It's difficult. It's difficult to go to a place like that and be able to do sufficient work. There are obviously patients that we saved, and there are patients that had good outcomes, and you hang on to those, and you tell yourself that you were there for those people, and you have managed to help some people. But you know, there are kids that still to this day don't talk. They haven't talked. There's a girl that her sister was, I think, 14 years old, and she had a burnt face, and she had an open wound and a broken arm, and we had to pull her arm together and put it in a splint. And she was screaming at the time. And it's been, you know, 7 weeks since then, and she still doesn't talk. She still doesn't talk. She's still that traumatized. And
I'm very sorry.
it's hard. It's hard to know that, you know, I played a part in that because it was me that pulled her arm and put it in a splint. And I don't know whether that was the thing that traumatized her. I don't know whether it was the explosions that traumatized her. I don't know what it was, but she still doesn't talk.
You did
It's tough.
the
It's
best
tough.
that you could. You did the best that you could. And as a doctor, you were there to treat their bodies. But I'm always going back to this. As a human being, what do you wish you could have? I'm very sorry. What you could have given them at the time? Something that is beyond medicine, something that is deeper. What do you wish you could have given them?
Their freedom. Their freedom. They've lived under occupation for how many years? They've lived in this blockade in Gaza for how many years? You know, these kids were so amazing. I remember when, you know, when I was at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah, and there was a bomb that went off 50 meters away, 70 meters away from the hospital, and the whole emergency department was shaking, and water started coming down from the ceiling, and a couple of roof tiles fell. And I remember just being in panic when it happened. And one of the children grabbed my hand, and you know, he just said to me, "Ish malaki, doctor," means "What's wrong, doctor? Are you okay?" He goes, "Don't worry about that sound. You're here. You're okay." And I remember just thinking to myself, this child is comforting me. I mean, the level of humanity that this child has, because he knows that I'm a foreign doctor and he knows that I'm not used to this. And for him to just, you know, hold my hand and want to comfort me, and this was a young child. And I just thought to myself, like, these children deserve so much better. You know, despite all of the inhumanity that's happened to them, look at the humanity that they're showing me. And that's why I just wish they had the same freedoms and the same hopes as everybody else. They had the same opportunities like every other child in the world. They deserve so much better, those children in Gaza. They really do.
And in a place, Dr. Mustafa, where childhood has been ripped away, just like we see, what do you think these children need the most? Not just to survive, but to heal, to feel human again. What do you believe the world? Do you believe the world has failed to understand about them? And I keep talking about children because they are the most innocent ones. They are the most. They are those who don't understand why this is happening to them. Do you think the world, we have failed them?
I think we have. I think we have failed them. There's almost 1 million children right now in Gaza who are starving to death. they're starving to death. We can't even get a glass of water, a loaf of bread into Gaza. This will be a stain on humanity for, the history books will remember what happened. And people can spin this any way they like. But when you have every major human rights organization calling it a genocide, when you have the ICJ saying it's a probable genocide, and they're only saying probable because the court case is ongoing, but for them to say probable, it's a very high threshold, and it's only got worse since the ruling of probable genocide. Now we have an open campaign of starvation of 2 million people. The bombings of hospitals has become more regular. The destruction of schools, the destruction of homes, the openness in which government officials in Israel are saying they want to relocate the population of Gaza, which is a call for ethnic cleansing. There isn't any point in debating what this is anymore. It's obvious what it is. They're telling you what it is. So, I try and avoid even talking about, the word genocide or ethnic cleansing, because I just say to myself, what's the point? What's the point? I mean, if I can't even, if you've literally got the other side saying this is what they're doing, that they're going to starve all of Gaza, that they are going to ethnically cleanse all of Gaza, what's left? What's left to discuss? What's left to argue? Why are we still having the same conversation where we're arguing over words? I mean, they say actions are louder than words. Look at the actions. Look at the actions. When hospitals are bombed, when hundreds of children a day are killed or injured, when food has been cut off deliberately. Look at the actions. This is why I don't like to focus on the words. I like to focus on the actions. And that's why, I just want to get things done for these children.
Doctor, you've returned to the quiet of the Australian life, but I imagine your mind is still in Gaza. It obviously is. What is it like to walk the halls of calm, well-equipped hospitals after witnessing an entire health system collapse under bombardment in Gaza?
It's surreal. It's surreal. It's surreal to see the peace and the quiet. And, when I was there in Gaza, I was always worried, whether we were going to be bombed in the hospital. Even sleeping in the room, you just didn't know when it would come. And I, remember now laying in my, when I go to sleep or when I have something to eat, and I always just think to myself, I'm so lucky. It's just lucky. I'm so grateful for everything that I have since leaving Gaza. But, that's why I'm doing my best to try and make a change out there. At the end of the day, I'm a doctor. I'm just a humanitarian. I just want peace and justice, and I want the dignity of all human life. And right now, the whole world seems to be forgetting about the dignity and the human life in Gaza. And we need to humanize these people, because everyone gets dehumanized in a genocide. The people committing the genocide and the people that are the victims of the genocide and the people watching the genocide. Because when you watch that many children killed a day and you become numb to it, that's a part of your own humanity that dies. So we all need to heal from this, not just Gaza, but everybody else that's involved and everybody else that's watching. We all need to be humanized again after this.
Dr. Mustafa, in the middle of such profound death and devastation, did you ever find, and I want to remind you also about the good things that you've seen and encountered in Gaza, did you ever find moments of grace, maybe a child's smile, a hand of help, your hand being held, a moment of human connection that really pierced through the darkness?
Yeah, I remember when I got picked up. I used to get picked up regularly by paramedics in the ambulance because they used to see me walking to work, from the safe house and stuff. Because we didn't have a car. So I would walk, 20, 25 minutes sometimes to work. And sometimes the ambulance drivers would stop and pick me up. And, they would always invite me for coffee. And I was always insist on me paying, and they would always insist on paying. And we would argue about who's going to pay, and we'd be outside the shop with the ambulance parked, and just having a full-on argument about who's paying for the coffee. And, you know, the generosity of the people there, the humanity of them, the bravery, these are all cherished moments that I have. You know, when we would sit down in the emergency room, me and the nurses and the doctors, and we would be chatting, and they would be telling me about their life, and I'd tell them about mine, and they would ask me stories about Australia and kangaroos and crocodiles and things like that. And, you know, between those mass casualty events, you form real friendships with people, and there's a lot of love there. And I'm sure you've seen on my Instagram, you know, arm wrestling championships that we used to do. Everyone used to challenge me to arm wrestling matches, and you know, there was a lot of love. And yeah, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for my experience there. I'm grateful for the people I've met, and I hope one day that I can return to a free and peaceful Gaza.
That was my second question. That was my next question. Would you return, even during the occupation and bombardment? Would you still return to Gaza?
Yeah, of course I would. I would definitely return.
Are you having any plans to do so?
Yeah, yes, I am. You know, obviously I've got a lot going on right now with pushing for this children's hospital that I'm trying to establish in Gaza. But yeah,
tell me about that.
I want to go.
Tell me about the children's hospital in Gaza.
We're trying to establish a children's hospital via donations, but we're going to go with a large foundation that hopefully will support this endeavor. And we want to have the legitimacy of having governments involved. It doesn't have to be one government, but it can be multiple governments. And we want to get a children's field hospital into Gaza to help the children in Gaza to be fully supplied with medicine and equipment, and us able to operate on children and be able to give them the best possible chance to survive their injuries and also to thrive as well. So that's what I'm on the road campaigning for. And it's picking up a lot of momentum, because at the end of the day, children are innocent and they should never be used as political bargaining chips. And that's all my message is. My message is about the humanity of everybody, every child, no matter their race, color, religion. We should always respect the dignity and the suffering of children.
For any child in the world. You've said you're not interested in playing safe anymore, that every day children are dying and you refuse to stay silent. This interview is one of those examples. Thank you for doing this, really. And if you had one uninterrupted moment with the Prime Minister or Foreign Minister, not as a political actor, but as a witness, just like you said, as a humanitarian, what would you really say to them, human to human?
You know, every day it changes what I would say to them. Sometimes I think that I would shout and scream, but then I realize that a lot of people have shouted and screamed and it's not done anything. Other times I would plead, but I think what I would just say is that leaders are built on moments, and this is the moment to show the world leadership. This is the biggest crime of our time. And history will judge every leader for what they did. And this is about legacy and history for these leaders. What did they do?
That's very, very well said. One last question. What are your hopes for Gaza? What are your hopes, especially for children? From this position that you are in right now, after what you've seen, what you saw, what are your hopes?
I hope that one day we have a free Gaza, a free Palestine, and all the doctors that went there during the war, all the doctors that have been there through the other wars, and all the people that were out and were protesting, and all the people that helped in the struggle, we all meet in a free Palestine one day, and everyone's welcomed, and families are reunited together, whether it's Palestinians who are living in refugee camps in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt, all over the world. And we can all go home. I just wish that everyone can go home and be happy and live in security and peace, no matter who they are. And that's something that's been deprived of these Palestinian people for 77 years now. And it would be amazing if that could happen.
And
that is my hope.
Are you going to be okay, Doctor? Now human to human as well.
I'm not the victim. The victim of those children in Gaza and those people in Gaza, they're the victims. And they're the ones that need the sympathy, not me. So, I'll be okay as long as I can make sure that they're okay. That's what my mission is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor, for speaking to us. We wish you the best. Let's stay in touch. We are very interested in seeing how the project Children's Hospital in Gaza comes along. Really hoping that happens. This is something that's really necessary. Let's stay in touch, and thank you really for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bio ovo doktor Mohammed Mustafa koji nam se javio iz Pertha, Australije, nakon svoje misije u okupiranoj Gazi. Ostanite uz nas. Predsjednik Sjedinjenih Američkih Država Donald Trump boravio je u Saudijskoj Arabiji, čime je održao 4-dnevnu turneju po zaljevu u pratnji američkih biznismena, uključujući izvršnog direktora Tesla i Trumpovog savjetnika Ilona Muska. Trump je prvo posjetio Rijad, gdje se održao Saudijsko-američki investicijski forum, a zatim je otputovao u Katar i Ujedinjene Arapske Emirate u četvrtak. Posjet zaljevu je uglavnom usmjeren na ekonomska pitanja s očekivanim najavama investicija koje su dosegle hiljade milijardi dolara. Saudijska Arabija je već obećala 600 milijardi dolara u investicijama u Sjedinjene Američke Države u sljedeće 4 godine. Donald Trump je najavio sporazume u ukupnoj vrijednosti većoj od 200 milijardi dolara između Sjedinjenih Američkih Država i Ujedinjenih Arapskih Emirata, uključujući obavezu vrijednu 14,5 milijardi dolara između kompanija Boeing Aerospace i aviokompanije Etihad Airways, prilikom obećavši jačanje veza između Sjedinjenih Država te zaljevske države tokom višednevne posjete Bliskom istoku. Američki predsjednik Donald Trump je tokom turneje na Bliskom istoku najavio ukidanje i sankcija Siriji na zahtjev domaćina ove turneje i saudijskom prestolonasljednika Mohameda bin Salmana. Sjedinjene Države uvele su stroge sankcije Siriji za vrijeme vladavine Bašara al-Asada. Ipak, zahvaljujući ovom potezu, Trump bi za uzvrat trebao dobiti pristup prirodnim resursima Sirije i dozvolu za gradnju Trump Towera u centru Damaska. Trump je pristao i da se kratko sastane sa privremenim sirijskim prestolonasljednikom Ahmedom al-Sharom, inače bivšim visoko pozicioniranim članom Al-Kaide, koji je proveo 5 godina u američkom zatvoru u Iraku.
Trenutno istražujemo i normaliziramo odnose s novom sirijskom vladom, počevši od mog sastanka s predsjednikom Ahmadom al-Sharom i sastanka sekretara Rubija sa sirijskim ministrom vanjskih poslova u Turskoj. Nakon što sam razgovarao o celokupnoj situaciji sa prestolonasljednikom Mohamedom bin Salmanom i turskim predsjednikom Erdoganom, naređujem prekid sankcija protiv Sirije kako bih im dao novi početak i priliku da napreduju.
U.S. President Donald Trump has wrapped up his trip to the Middle East. He flew out of Abu Dhabi today on Air Force One, and in his mind, he was very successful on this trip. It was a transactional nature in a lot of these talks in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, and those transactions were focused on business. One of the big business winners was Boeing, which has sold a lot of aircraft, both to Qatar Airways as well as the long-haul carrier Etihad here in the United Arab Emirates. And other businesses as well, the oil industry and the artificial intelligence sector with NVIDIA making deals in Saudi Arabia. But while Trump's approach was transactional, there was a lot of politics also going on. We saw him have the first meeting in 25 years with the Syrian leader. He met Ahmed al-Shar in Riyadh, and it's remarkable for a lot of reasons. One, that he used to be an al-Qaeda affiliated militant who had a $10 million bounty on his head from the Americans, and that he has just taken over since December Syria, which had been ruled for 50-odd years by the Assad family. This visit that Trump had with Share also saw Trump agree to start America lifting economic sanctions on Syria, which is crucial after it's faced years of war and also decades as a socialist economy. And a lot of the Gulf Arab states had been pushing Trump to recognize Syria as a way to kind of deleverage the influence that Iran has there. And on Iran, Trump repeatedly during this trip said that Iran had two choices. They could either accept a nuclear deal with the United States that would limit their enrichment or totally end it in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions. Now, Trump, just as he got on Air Force One in Abu Dhabi, said that the U.S. had given a proposal to Iran on what a deal would look like. Iran has not yet acknowledged this, but it marks a major turning point in those negotiations. And the one thing that really didn't come up was Israel-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip. Tangentially, Trump mentioned the suffering in Gaza, that people were starving there. But while he was on this trip, Israel intensified its aerial bombardment, artillery shelling, and other attacks in that besieged enclave, and the killing is going on there. And for right now, it doesn't look like there's any ceasefire immediately on the table that could stop that conflict. So while Trump leaves, he was successful in business and successful on the Syrian front, but the Israel-Hamas war still looms over this region and is one of the biggest risks for tensions further escalating.
U Istanbulu je u petak održan prvi sastanak ruskih i ukrajinskih delegacija u posljednje 3 godine. Detalji razgovora za sada nisu zvanično saopćeni, ali je ukrajinska strana iznijela prve utiske iz ovog susreta. Prema riječima izvora iz ukrajinske diplomatije, Rusija je tokom sastanka iznijela niz zahtjeva koje Kijev smatra potpuno nerealnim. Jedan od ključnih ruskih zahtjeva bilo je to povlačenje ukrajinskih oružanih snaga sa vlastite teritorije. Tursko ministarstvo vanjskih poslova naglasilo je važnost direktnog dijaloga dvije strane nakon dužeg perioda zastoja. Iako nije bilo konferencije za medije niti zvaničnih saopćenja, ovaj diplomatski kontakt u Istanbulu se tumači kao potencijalni signal spremnosti za nastavak pregovora uprkos dubokim razlikama u stavovima, prenose to svjetski mediji. Predsjednica Europske komisije Ursula von der Leyen komentirala je pokušaj uspostavljanja primirja, ali i poteze Rusije, te je nagovijestila kako će se razmatrati novi set sankcija Rusiji, ali i Vladimiru Putinu.
And we could witness all during the last days President Putin's true belief.
Posljednjih dana smo mogli svjedočiti svim istinskim uvjerenjima predsjednika Putina. Prvo je pozvao na prekid vatre oko godišnjice 9. maja, što nikada nije ispoštovao. Zatim je Ukrajina uz podršku Europske unije i Sjedinjenih Američkih Država pozvala na potpuno i bezuvjetno primirje u trajanju od 30 dana, što je predsjednik Putin potom odbio. I na kraju je ponudio direktan sastanak između Ukrajine i Rusije u Turskoj, ali predsjednik Zelenski je bio spreman za sastanak. Predsjednik Putin se nikada nije pojavio i to pokazuje istinska uvjerenja predsjednika Putina. On ne želi mir, pa moramo povećati pritisak i zato radimo na novom paketu sankcija. Ovaj paket će uključivati, na primjer, sankcije za Sjeverni tok 1 i Sjeverni tok 2. Uključivaće rad na uvrštavanju više plovila ruske tajne flote i također snižavanje gornje granice cijene nafte. I uključivaće više sankcija financijskom sektoru u Rusiji. Za nas je važno da želimo mir. Iz toga moramo povećati pritisak na predsjednika Putina dok ne bude spreman za mir.
So we just had a meeting with President Zelensky and then a phone call with President Trump to discuss the developments in the negotiations today. And the Russian position is clearly unacceptable and not for the first time. And so as a result of that meeting with President Zelensky and the discussion with President Trump, we are now closely aligning and coordinating our responses and will continue to do so.
Alors, un mot pour la presse française pour dire, comme vient de le rappeler Monsieur le Premier ministre, que tous ensemble, comme il y a quelques jours à Kiev, nous avons, avec le président Zelensky, fait retour des rendez-vous qui s'étaient tenus à Istanbul, où la délégation russe a décidé d'exclure la délégation américaine. Nous avons ensemble à l'instant eu une discussion avec le président Trump pour d'abord tous considérer qu'il était inacceptable pour une deuxième fois que la Russie, le président Poutine, ne réponde pas aux demandes qui ont été faites par les Américains, soutenus par l'Ukraine et les Européens. Pas de cessez-le-feu et pas de rendez-vous à un niveau décisionnel et pas de réponse sur le cessez-le-feu. Et donc dans ce contexte, nous allons continuer de nous coordonner avec nos partenaires européens, la coalition des volontaires et les États-Unis. Il y aura dans les prochaines heures des nouveaux contacts et des retours et nous apporterons les réponses requises. Nous continuons de nous battre pour la paix et nous continuons d'être aux côtés du président Zelensky et de nous coordonner très étroitement avec les États-Unis d'Amérique.
Переговоры по инициативе турецкой стороны перенесены на вторую половину дня. Кто использует слово «бутафорный»? Клоун, неудачник, человек вообще с неизвестным образованием в отношении людей, у которых есть не просто базовое образование, ученые степени, заслуги перед Отечеством, кто своим трудом доказал уровень профессионализма, он их так называет бутафорией. Это переговорная команда, это делегация, как это и было объявлено. Именно слово «делегация» звучало в соответствующих предложениях Российской Федерации. Именно она 3 года назад дала этому самому по-настоящему бутафорному шанс на сохранение и своей страны, и своего народа, который он также бездарно, потому что бутафорный, не использовал.
Toliko u Pulsu planete za ovu sedmicu. Ove i ostale informacije možete i dalje potražiti na našem sajtu newsmaxbalkans.com. Hvala za pažnju. Doviđenja.